Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's good to see you all. I mean, what can I say after these fantastic presentations which covered most of what we need to think about? Except that maybe we can reformulate it in a different way. You see, what the Sheikh mentioned is a very interesting heuristic about the 5 pillars and so on. I think there's another way of expressing it, which is the way of the ancient Greeks. For example, Plato. He had this thing called the tripartite classification, which is the mind, the body, and the soul. You can summarize it like that. And the fundamental thing that I would say that before we regain our glory as Muslim people, we need to think about 2 fundamental questions, or 2 fundamental propositions, or 2 fundamental objectives. The first is that we should be trying to do i'la kalimatullah, to raise Allah's word, which means to say that our objective, whatever it is that we are endeavoring to do in this world, should be to make Allah's word the highermost. The second objective, which is inexplicably linked with the first, is tamkeen al-Muslimin, which is to make Muslim people in a stronger position, to put Muslim people in a stronger position. And that tamkeen, or that putting Muslim people in a stronger position, can take all the forms that we've discussed today. But before we talk about the collective and the macro, I think it is important to dwell a little bit more on what the Sheikh was mentioning, which are the individual aspects. So when we talk about, let's start with the spirit, okay? The mind, the body, and the soul. Let's start with the soul. You see, the people of Tazkiyah, for example, Imam al-Ghazali and others, they really summarized the whole process in 2 ways, which is at-tahliyah wa at-tahliyah, that we should be trying to remove the impediments from our soul, remove those things which are negative, psychological things in our soul. That's the first thing. We can't really help other people before we help ourselves. Is the first thing. At-tahliyah means to remove the impurities. At-tahliyah means to adorn the individual. And it's interesting because his magnum opus, Al-Ghazali's magnum opus, Ihya Ulumuddin, was divided into 4 quadroons, 4 different quarters that he made. And the 3rd and 4th of those quadroons, the 3rd one is An al-Muhlikat, those things which destroy the human being. And the 4th one was An al-Munjiyat, the things that save the human being. So things, for example, like resentment and anger and desires, sexual desires, and this, that, and the other, all these negative emotions, which if not tamed will be very negative. That's the first thing we need to think about doing, removing those things. We can't talk about the Ummah and the genocide and Palestine and Sudan and this country and that country and whatever country, and we have a negative relationship with our parents, for example. I mean, this doesn't make any sense. There are some siblings that don't speak to each other. Siblings, blood siblings. You have some spousal relationships where one of the 2 spouses harbor resentment and anger and jealousy and rage for the other. Now, how is it the case that we're going to regain our former glory when we have implanted and entrenched and embedded within our own psyches those negative impurities? So the first order of business, therefore, is to try and remove those. And that takes training. That takes training. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ mentioned in many hadiths, إنما العلم بالتعلم والحلم بالتعلم والصبر بالتصبر, that certainly if you want to learn knowledge, you have to put yourself in the learning environment. If you want to be forbearant, then you have to be in that environment. If you want to be resilient and patient, if you want to be sabir, then you have to put yourself in the environment where that will be required. So that's the first thing, the removal of the impediments of the soul. The second thing is then to think about the virtues of human being, to try and grow in virtue, whether it's generosity or bravery or any of those virtues. But that can't really be done unless the first step is done. So this concerns the soul, and I won't mention too much about that because the Sheikh has already done so. But this is one of three things that we need to do. The second thing requires the body. Now it boggles the mind. It beggars belief that we're talking about an ummah here with 2 billion people that think it is plausible that they're going to move from a sedentary lifestyle to doing jihad. I don't see how this is going to happen. You're going to move from TikTok, you're a TikTok junkie, and then tomorrow you're going to be saving Palestine. I don't see how you can jump from A to B like this. Let's be real about the situation. A part of real tazkiyah is you have to put your body through a process where it knows how to handle fear. Physical fear, especially if you're a man. Because let's call a spade a spade. The elephant in the room is that the ummah gained glory through jihad fi sabilillah. It wasn't really through technological innovation. It wasn't really through economics. It was through, if there was one primary thing that a historian would have to choose, but he mentioned those. One physical act, that they had the bravery, they had the fortitude, they had the tawakkul ala Allah, that they could go and venture into the Roman Empire, the Persian Empire, from Spain to China. You don't just do that from living a sedentary lifestyle. Let's be real about the situation. So what can you do on a practical level? I think it's very important that especially Muslim men, and that doesn't exclude Muslim women, but especially Muslim men, have to put themselves and their bodies in a situation where their sympathetic nervous systems are on high alert and they know how to deal with panic. We can't go into the military in this country because they are engaged really in escapades which are against our own people, like the Iraq war and the Afghanistan war and so on and so forth. We can't do that stuff. I think there's only 20,000 people in the UK military, by the way. That's not even that much. These people don't even believe in their own cause. Imagine you have a country of 70 million people and only 20 or 30,000 people in the military. That means they don't even believe in their own. There's more Hamas than there is UK military. Can you believe that? This is a very interesting situation. But the military man has some level of training and advantage that us Muslim men don't have. Why should we put anybody at an advantage over us? I tell you, I think that the second best thing, or you can even argue, the best thing that you can do as a Muslim man, which is free and open, and is martial arts. I must say to you. And there were people in the past who wrote books about this. Suyuti, who is an Egyptian scholar of the past, who died in 9/11, but that's not to try and say anything here, but that's when he died. See, I'm talking about jihad and now I'm mentioning 9/11. I mean, the MI5 is probably writing something down already. But he died and he wrote a book called Al-Musara'a ila al-Musara'a. He wrote a book called Hastening to Grappling. It's a very interesting book. Because if you know about freestyle wrestling and grappling and these kind of things, wallahi, it's a game changer. If you put your children into that, you'll see that their disposition changes. They have such a mental and dispositional advantage. It's true. So I'm telling you, the body must be cared for and looked after and so on. And you have to think about these things and you have to engage the sympathetic nervous system. The mind. Once again, we're living in, let's be fair. The UK has a lot of good universities. It does. So why don't we take advantage of that? For our own cause, selfish gain. But once again, when we say selfish gain, we're going back to objective 1 and objective 2. I'ala kalimatullah and tamkin al-muslimin. Which is to make Allah's word highermost and tamkin al-muslimin. If everybody has these three things in their mind, that okay, I want to, from a bodily perspective, from a spiritual perspective, from a mental perspective, I want to get better, but I'm not doing it for my own self. I'm doing it for the ummah. And then they impart that then to their family, because it's not a selfish thing. And then they impart that then to their community. Already we have a basis for the rejuvenation of the Ummah. If you ask a question, and this goes to the second part of what I'm trying to say here today. If you ask a question, what is it that makes someone influential? Or what is influence? What are the main areas of influence in a society? I would tell you that I think there's 4 main areas. There's 4 main types, major types of influence. There's military influence. As we mentioned, I think this could be the most important. You could make a very strong argument that this is the most important. There's political influence, which, by the way, means nothing without the military one, because Thomas Hobbes said, covenants are but words if they're not backed by swords. So if you don't have a consequence, you don't have a case. So you have the military influence, you have the political influence, you have the economic influence, as you mentioned, and then you have the media influence. And if you want to add a 5, you say academic influence. These are 5 ways you can influence a society. And so us Muslims, we need to get involved in those things, and there are battles at each stage. For example, in the media war, that media might be the only militant option for us here in the West. Because we can't really necessarily go out and do certain things that our predecessors in the Muslim community could in the past. So we've got social media, and that has changed the game, if we're being totally honest. It has changed the game. And we've got all types of alternative media. We can tap that market. As Muslims, we must, in fact, tap that market. And our survival is predicated on the extent to which we can tap that market and use it for our own advantage. Because if we don't do it, it's going to be done to us. If we don't engage those markets in the media and even the creative industries within it, then it's going to be the opposite. Is going to be the Zionist products, for example, or the feminist products, or the liberal products that we consume. So we need to be able to provide an alternative. In terms of education, once again, you've got to think to yourself, what is it that I can do? Because everyone here is different. Everyone here has a skill that someone else here doesn't have. Put your hands up if you can speak more than one language. Okay, see, look. And I'm pretty sure that, what language do you speak, my friend? Urdu. See, I don't speak Urdu. See, he has a skill that I don't have. And Urdu is a very important language because you can also understand Hindi, for example, right? Which is the language spoken by the Indian people. Now, once again, if you're creative and you're political, maybe you want to engage that somehow. I don't know. How are you going to use that? I'm not asking you, I'm not putting you on the spot. How are you going to use it? Some people here are more mathematical. And they think, how is it the case that, okay, my mathematical skills are going to lead me, or my IT skills? There's a lot of, for some reason, IT. I used to work in the school, and they never used to put the Muslim guys as like head of one of the social sciences, because that's where opinions and all this, very rarely. But every time you go to the IT department, you find a Pakistani brother there, or from a guy from Bangladesh. Because they know you can't really, or at least they think, and this is where I'm coming, right? You can't really influence anyone with that. They can't influence our children with that. Put them in the IT room, open the door, you'll see them there. But really, how can you leverage your IT capabilities for the Ummah? Maybe you can create an app. No, honestly. Nowadays, it's all about apps. So why don't you create an app? Once again, with the 2 objectives in mind. I'la kalimatullah, number 1. Number 2, tamkeen al-Muslimin. What app can I create? Because remember, we think somehow it's going to go from 0 to 100. That we're going to be living this life and then Al-Mahdi is going to come and he's going to save the day. I done a interview with Piers Morgan recently and some time ago, and I was walking right here in East London. Wallahi, this is a true story and I wouldn't lie about this. Some guy came to me in the street and he said to me, "What's your surname?" I said, "Hijab, this is my..." He goes, "What's your dad's name?" I said, "I thought you knew my dad." I said, "My dad's name is Nabil." He goes, "Are you sure it's not Abdullah?" He was trying to insinuate, okay, maybe he's looking for a Mahdi figure. Because, his name will be Muhammad ibn Abdullah. People are looking for some guy to come and save the day. It's not going to work like that, my friend. I said, you should have said those words when my wife was here. You want to give me more respect. She'd done that. Because she thinks I'm a Dajjal. I'm only kidding. So here, the point I'm making to you is this. The point I'm making to you is there are many battles. And that those many battles, whether it's in the world of academia, whether it's in the world of media, whether it's in the world of da'wah, wherever, those many battles will accumulate until it reaches a critical mass. And that critical mass is what's going to create the preamble for Al-Mahdi and this one and that one and these things and end of days and so on and so forth. That's what's going to create the conditions that are required for the Muslims to regain their glory. Some groups and sects, they only focus on the Khilafah. It's essentially like, okay, no problem. We all want the Khilafah. But don't commission an individual to try and move a mountain by himself. If we commission each individual to move a boulder, then the mountain can move. And those small boulders and those small rocks is where you excel. You have to discover where is it that I excel. And you have to do a proper needs assessment on yourself. Where am I good? What do I like? That's what Ibrahim was saying. It's true. It's true. That's a good way. And if you have the right intentions, that certainly intentions or deeds are based on intentions, and for everybody is what they have earned. If you have the right intentions, even if you fail your so-called objective, and even if we don't regain the glory and so on, then Allah will reward us. Was Nuh alayhi salam, was he a failure? There was no Ummah at his time, there was no Khilafah at his time and so on and so forth, but was he a failure? He wasn't a failure because he did what Allah commissioned to do and he did what he could do. Nuh alayhi salam. He was not a leader of a polity. If all of our success was based on political and economic and this and that, then you would have to condemn many of the prophets who couldn't achieve any of that. Our success is not based on necessarily the outcomes, but it's based on our intentions and what we could do that we did do. And that applies with Palestine and it applies with the entire Ummah. And I'll leave it as that. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.